We'd like to welcome everyone to Junior Achievement of Southern Colorado's virtual speaker series. And today we have Dennis Maes with us, and there are some students here, high school students who are ready to hear Dennis's story as a public servant advocating for education to ensure the Pueblo community thrives. And Dennis, I would love for you to share your story. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how it started. You had mentioned that law was a first love of yours and a dream. Where did that spark come from?
You know, I just had an interest in studying concepts and developing positions on certain things. It's kind of interesting that my interest in law actually began when I was in about the second grade. And it was embellished some 2 or 3 years later when I was involved in a debate with some other students. I went to a Catholic school and we were arguing some Catholic principles. And one of the judges was in fact a district court judge by the name of Albert Tomsick. And after the debate was over, he came up to me, he says, you know, I really think you might have a future in being a lawyer at some time. So it just kind of reconfirmed what I had been thinking about anyway, and allowed me to go along that path. I had a particular interest in law because it's an area where there is a real possibility to help other people who are struggling in many areas of life. And so I was able to represent people initially who were indigent, poor, both on the civil area and in the criminal area, and then I had a general practice of law. And that allowed me then to become a judge. I was a judge for 24 years. The last 17 years, I was the chief judge of the 10th Judicial District here in Pueblo. And what was neat about that is I was able to then sit in and obviously make a lot of decisions, very difficult decisions at times. But my main goal was to try to make sure that when people left the courtroom that they were comfortable that the system had worked. And also the main goal was to try to make their lives more predictable in some ways. You weren't always in a position where everybody was going to get what they wanted, but at least they had an idea of where their life was leading. And so that's kind of carried me all the way through. My mom and dad were obviously hugely involved in how I perceived life. My mother was just totally devoted to helping others, and always told us that no matter how bad we think we have it, there's somebody that has it a little bit worse. And my dad was real big on engaging in public service. And so those two kind of melted together to lead me where I am today.
Dennis, I know from your bio and from the nominator's perspective, your focus on truancy in Pueblo was such a commitment to that community to really enforce the importance of education and accountability for families. Why is it important for kids to have that accountability to remain in school? And how much of that is a struggle for someone who works at the Board of Education to ensure that school is an environment where students are able to grow and thrive and learn, and where their families encourage them to attend and participate every day?
Well, obviously it's pretty trite to say that if you're not in school, you can't learn. So our kids have to be in school. And the real thing with the truancy program, when we started out and as it morphed along, and as we learned from our own mistakes, and by the way, our truancy program became one that was nationally recognized. But the key thing about truancy was to define the cause or causes as to why students were not in school, why children were not in school. I will tell you that 90% of the time it wasn't because they didn't want to be in school. Most students, and particularly in the elementary school years, that's where everything's happening. So we knew that there was something more to it than just, I don't want to go to school. Well, what we found out are there were a lot of reasons why students were going to school. Some of them suffering from severe depression. Some of them not depressed, but living in a home where there were problems. For example, you have perhaps a single mom, a single dad raising some kids, and the mom and dad are severely depressed and have a difficult time, not because of anything of their own fault, but getting the children to school. So it was important for us to identify what those the causes were, and then attack them with every resource that we had. And we had a group of people from the community who are actually called community advocates that had a certain caseload of the truant students, and they would make sure that they were interacting with the students and their families at the same time. So it was a complete commitment, not only from the school to the students to the families, but the community as well. And the community really became a very important part of the truancy program. We had a lot of the agencies involved at any given time. We would probably have at a meeting 15 to 20 different representatives from agencies talking about what we're doing and making sure we are all on the same page and not duplicating a lot of services, so that we get more bang for our buck on that thing. So
Right.
it was something we were very proud of. I would also like to say that we worked with our state legislators, and in two successive years, the school attendance age was from 7 to 16, and we went in one year and changed it to 17, and then the next year we went in and dropped it down to 6. So we added 2 years on it for compulsory school education. And the theory behind going up to 17 was that we understood that if we had students see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, that they're close to it, that they're going to stick with it, and we're going to have better results. So we went and had legislation passed specifically to do that. So we didn't, whenever we saw a roadblock, we figured out a way to get around it. And we wanted to just have the strongest truancy program that we could. And it is by far one of the most fabulous efforts I've ever been involved in my entire life. And there is just nothing that's more gratifying or satisfying than to see a student succeed. That's a fabulous feeling to have.
Absolutely. And then additionally, we talk at Junior Achievement about how important it is to keep students not only in school, but when they're in school, to be engaged in hands-on learning and that experiential environment in the classroom that provides them the opportunity to learn by doing. I am wondering, in your career, what was it that prompted you to say, yes, I'm a lawyer now, but how did you have the drive or the motivation to want to continue to move to being a judge? What was it in your heart? What inspired you to continue on that journey?
Well, as I indicated, I think and this is obviously my opinion only, but I think our primary purpose on earth is to serve others, and the profession I chose really lent itself to doing that, not only in the private sector by representing individual people with individual problems, but also as a judge, being able to say, okay, these folks are going through these kinds of times or anything. I have an opportunity to at least use my experience and knowledge to help them move along with their lives. I give the example of the easiest thing when I was handling a criminal docket. The easiest thing in the world would be to send somebody to prison. I mean, that doesn't take a whole lot of work. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort. The hard thing is changing them, getting them to change their lifestyles, to understand that there's a much better life for them out there if they're able to do that. That takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of coordination with other people in the community. But again, it's just so gratifying when you see somebody that was down in their luck or whatever reason that they got themselves in a jam, to be able to help pull them out of it. You know, it's just always about trying to make life better for somebody else. And if we do that, what we end up doing is we end up making life better for everybody. because they become productive citizens and are involved in the community. And that's why the students that are involved, I'm so impressed with them. And one of the other things, Angie, when you get back to the truancy thing, is one of the other things we look for is, what is it that's going to keep this student engaged in school? Well, maybe it's playing the trombone. Maybe it's art. Maybe it's drama. Maybe it's debate. Well, whatever it is, let's go ahead and really put a lot of effort into that. And that's going to be what one of the reasons that a student's going to stay involved in their school, because it becomes relevant to them. And so we always have to look at what are the strengths. Every one of our students has a tremendous number of strengths. Let's build on the strengths. That's what we do.
That's a beautiful way to say it too. Building on those strengths and really working with those to mentor and lead in a way that's encouraging and nurturing is always so important. Absolutely. I'd like to see if any of the students have thought of any questions. Has anything prompted you to ask a question? And you can unmute yourselves if you have any questions for Dennis at this point.
So like, what really drew you towards education in the first place?
To the education part of it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it all goes back to the same thing. Most of you don't know that I actually taught for 2 years as well. I taught 6th grade and some 7th grade for 2 years. It kind of took a little bit of a sidetrack before I went to law school. And again, it's because I think that's where I honestly believe that if we address people's needs from the very earliest stages of their life, that we're going to be able to solve a lot of the problems we have today by putting our resources into education at the very earliest stages. And it's just so important. People say, well, do you think the law is the coolest profession and all that? No, teaching's the coolest profession. I had to have a teacher to teach me how to practice law. So that's the front line. I mean, that's where everything starts. And then, we have even added benefits when we have the family support. And when we don't have the family support, that's a situation where the school needs to step in and provide the support for them. But I just, I wish I would have been a better student than I was. But I just think so highly of the public school education, and it's a real cornerstone of a free democratic society. I think we'd be lost if we did not have a free public school education system. I hope that answers you, Maya.
Well, you had said you wish you'd been a better student. What does it mean? What does it mean to be a good student? I know with my own daughters, we've tried to say it's not so much whether you know it already, it's whether you're willing to keep trying to find an answer, right? Persevering through that. But for you, what makes a better student? How can students ensure that they're getting the most out of their school experience to set themselves up for a career journey of success?
Well, what I was referring to with myself is that, it's obviously early on, I loved to read and I loved to write and stuff like that. But there were other topics that I didn't pay near as much attention to and give as much serious consideration that I should have. Well, all of those things really prepare us for life. I used to tell my students in truancy court, when I'd have them, I'd have a truancy court where they'd come in on Fridays, and we'd tutor them. And somebody would, one of the students would sit there, and I'd say, "Why aren't you doing anything?" "Well, I'm finished with everything." I said, "Well, you could do extra if you want. I've never heard of anyone yet who was so smart that their head exploded and their brain exploded because they had so much information." So the more information we have, the more knowledgeable we are about life in general, leads us to the place where when we have to make decisions in life, we're prepared for it from many aspects. And the other thing is, I just wish I would have spent more time in some of the areas that were less interesting, just for my own value as well. You know, I guess I wish I'd have been a better student in climatology, for instance, and learned about cirrus, numulus clouds and whatever they are. You know? But, you know, it's an opportunity that's now past me, but thank God I was able to at least accomplish what I have with what I had before me at the time. I hope that answers your question.
It does, and it's funny, Lauren, we work a lot with teachers, of course, at Junior Achievement, and we rely on teachers to help us bring volunteers into the classroom, bring volunteers virtually now, like yourself, into classrooms, and provide mentoring access to students. And Lauren has said before that teaching creates other professions, and it was certainly true in your case that that this teaching experience really created for you a driver to move to law, to move to the bench. So it's exciting to see that connection as well back to education and back to Junior Achievement and how we work in classrooms. Additionally, at Junior Achievement, we talk about education being an economic driver, workforce readiness, ensuring that we have a skilled and talented workforce that's ready to take over and really increase the economic impact in a community. How have you seen education's role in Pueblo play an important part as an economic driver for your community?
Well, I think you've hit it on the nail on the head when you talk about, you know, there is life after high school, and what is that going to look like? And I go back to the situation about community involvement and that sort of thing. So just take a little step back in history. For instance, my generation, I think we did a disservice when I was growing up. It became the mantra that every student should go to college. You know, that's the answer to it. And as a result of that, we maybe ignored career technical education. We ignored other areas where students became disenchanted because school wasn't relevant to them. You know, there were some students that wanted to know why when they touched this wire that was connected into the wall, that their fingers started burning, you know, and that was their interest in that. And that was an opportunity for us to really make a difference in their lives and the value of and understanding the value of education. So, you know, do we need lawyers? We need lawyers. Do we need plumbers? We need everybody. I mean, that's all there is to it. And when we have an educated workforce like that, regardless of what area they're in, it's just means so much more for the community as a whole. It just is enriching. And so, you know, there's no way getting around it. There's no way getting around it. It might, I see students that, I'll give you an example of when we had our truancy court, and that's again when I'd have it on Friday afternoons, and the students would come in, and I had some students that were going to be teachers from the university come down, and they would teach these things. It's amazing when you use a little bit of creativity how a student who isn't interested, who says, I'm not interested in math, and then all of a sudden you start working in an area where he or she sees math in the light that they like to see it, and all of a sudden it becomes a fascinating subject for them. So I mean, it's just a manner of making sure that we're able to reach students so that they can have the best life experiences they possibly can in whatever area that they go into, and respect that and guide them and try to find a way for them to be successful. I am a big proponent of career technical education. I think, as I indicated with my generation, I think we missed out on a lot of folks that would have been very productive, but for the fact that we kind of put all our eggs in one basket and saying everybody go to college. Well, college isn't for everybody.
And when you look at that ROI value for a trade school, a technical school, it's really phenomenal. And again, as you said, and something we talk about in junior achievement, it takes every member of the community. It takes every small business, every plumber, every electrician, every automobile repair shop, every banker, every lawyer. There are so many pieces and aspects to what makes up our community, and what professions make up our community. And I loved what you said about we call them light bulb moments at junior achievement, where students are having light bulb moments about, oh, wow, now I've made a connection, or now I understand. And I taught my daughter's third grade class, and I asked her how I did. I said, and I put myself out there, Dennis, because she's 9 and you never know. So I said, well, how did I do? How was I for your class? And she said, Mom, you were really good. And the program was really good. And do you want to know how I know? And I said, I'd love to know how you know. And she said, because even Carter was paying attention and participating. She said, and Carter never participates. He hates school. And that's the type of thing at junior achievement that we also talk about, where bringing someone into the class that can light that fire, can create that light bulb moment for a student. They want to be taught. They have a thirst for knowledge. It just might be in a different way than a traditional, learn, memorize, quiz environment, right? They might need more of experiential education.
Well, and I think sometimes we operate under some real myths and fallacies, and that somehow or another there are students that don't want to learn anything. That's just not accurate. I don't think there is any student that does not want to be successful and does not want to have knowledge. Now, things happen along the way that kind of provide a detour for that. But at the outset, there isn't one child who does not want to learn and does not want to be able to participate. I go to the schools, and I think it's kind of neat when I go to first and second graders, and we're talking about something, and you ask a question, and every student raises his or her hand, everybody, and then you say, okay, and they go, oh, I don't know. But they wanted to participate. That's what they were doing, is they were telling you, I want to be a part of this, Yeah. And so I think we just need to find a way to build on those the enthusiasm and the excitement of these kids. My wife and I were walking. We walk in the morning, and a couple of days ago I mentioned, and I don't know, maybe I'm different than everybody else, but one of the things I love when I'm around, for instance, small children, babies, is to watch them. And if you ever do, and they see a butterfly or something, and man, I mean, that whole experience just envelops them. And you could just see all of this. I guess I can't see it, but I just imagine all of this knowledge that's going into this child's brain. Or they see a dog, or they hear a noise, and I mean, it really just, and it's just a fabulous experience, because what your experience right then and there is the beginnings of the learning process. I mean, like, none of us were born knowing how to tie our shoelaces. I mean,
Right.
If we think about that, right? Shoelaces, big deal. Well, how did your, my mom say, okay, no, you got to put the loop here. You're going to end up with a knot. You're not going to end up with, but what a fabulous thing to actually observe humans soaking in all of this knowledge. It's really fascinating to me.
I love that. And I think that's such a great, you're seeing those cylinders firing, right? And that, like a light bulb moment in a classroom, or when an algebraic problem computes, or when you finally get the theme of a novel, perhaps. It's all very similar. Education was, of course, something you were very passionate about. Something else is mental health. I mean, two things that are critically important to invest in a community's infrastructure to ensure that we're able to support our communities. Tell us about the Mental Health Pro Bono program. I understand you engage middle school volunteers. Is that right for that program?
Yeah, so let me take you back a little bit and share some personal stuff with you. My younger daughter, Lise, when she was a senior in high school, uh, shortly before graduation, was hit with depression. We don't know what happens, why it happens, whatever, but it was very, very serious, and right before graduation, and
Mm.
we didn't know what was going to happen. And to this day she still suffers from, but she's successful. She's been graduated from the University of Colorado in Boulder. She's working up in Denver, and she has some struggles. Well, I ended up with depression. uh, I can tell you the exact thing that happened. I was at Mass one Sunday morning, and go to Mass, then we're going to go to breakfast, and in the middle of Mass, this cloud just came over me, and I mean, the anxiety hitting the whole bit. So that was about 18 years ago, around the time Maya was born. And so I take Prozac every day. I've been fortunate enough that I have some bad days, but I'm able to get through them, as opposed to some people that just really struggle with it. But one of the things that I've always said is the silver linings on these things is I wouldn't wish depression on anybody or anxiety on anybody. But what it did for me is it allowed me to actually know what it is. And when I found out and I was able to realize that a lot of our students suffered from depression and anxiety, and Judge, I can't stay in the classroom because there's too much drama. Well, what if we make accommodations for you? And sure enough, we made accommodations for a student. They were able to be in a smaller classroom or something, and they thrived. So so that started me along the pathway on the realization that we had to combat this stigma attached to mental health issues, and that we had to treat it like every other illness. I mean, if you have a broken arm, you go to the doctor to get it fixed. So we had to get away from the fact that, oh, I'm depressed, people think I'm crazy or something. We had to get around that and say, no, the best way to address that is hit it head on. And so we did an extensive campaign on that, and which resulted in the Mental Health Pro Bono program. And now we have 20 some mental health professionals here in Pueblo that volunteer their services free of charge to people who are having mental health issues. Well, one of the things we knew is that this isn't simply something that adults face. The students at very early ages, the trauma situations that they face from the time, sometimes they're 2 or 3 if they're in a home where there's domestic violence. That, I don't know that we pay enough attention to that, but that child is scarred when he or she sees violence like that. So it was important for us to make sure that those services were available in the school. So as a result of that, we now have mental health counselors in all the middle schools in Pueblo, and they have access to it. And then we have mental health counselors that are available in the high schools as well. So it was an interesting process, and we had a grant that we were able to access to do a pilot program. And when the grant ended and we knew it was going to end, we knew that we had to find a way to sustain that program. It was so valuable. And there was actually Health Solutions decided they were going to take it over. And there was a real concern that their outpatient population was going to go down with what we were doing in the school. Well, what we discovered is it did not go down at all. And the students that were now aware of the ability to access mental health counseling just spiked in the schools. And what it proved to us is there was a need, and 2, that students would access that need. And you can't learn if you're not well. And that doesn't just mean because you have the flu or something like that. It means if you're depressed and you're sitting there and you're trying to figure it out, or you were depressed and you're anxious and you didn't sleep all night and you're just not prepared for school. So those things are also important in what we're doing. And for the longest time, Angie, and I'm still not sure we're there, the United States has done a terrible job of addressing the mental health issues of its citizens, and particularly when it comes to children. I recall insurance. Well, your insurance policy will cover 5 visits to your mental health counselor. Really? Really? Oh, so after five visits,
You're
I won't
fine.
be
You're
depressed
fine after
anymore,
5.
right? Yeah. You know, the other thing, all these things teach you something too, because when we had the mental health program and the kids were in school, you know, we felt comfortable, and then we started thinking, well, wait a minute. They're out on spring break. They're out on summer vacation. They're out on Christmas break. Well, depression doesn't know it's Christmas break. You know, those things are still there. So we had to realize that it wasn't just the time when the students were in school that we had to address, but all the time. They had to know that we were available at any time to help if there were any concerns. So yeah, to this day, my involvement in that, our mental health pro bono program is just huge. Every year we have a fundraiser in December, around the first, second week of December. And I think this last year we had some like 250 participants at our breakfast. I think we raised somewhere around $70,000 so that we can continue to provide these services for people. It's just a huge thing. I previously served on the board of directors for Mental Health America of Colorado, and so yeah, that's you know, I think every one of us probably, I'm sure the students that are here today, I'm sure that they either have a family member or they themselves or a friend has been touched by this. And you know, it's just really important that we continue to educate and provide the services when they're available.
Wow, Dennis, you know, when you read your bio and you see the accolades, you know, I mean, you've won numerous lifetime achievement awards. You're on the governor's council for education. You know, it's for you to be brave, honest, and vulnerable with us, and share that story is really powerful, and I think is a commitment to the type of person you are, the type of servant leader you are. And it really touched me how you said that it helped you create empathy for those that you were making decisions about, right? So you had a personal experience, and you were able to take that and bring empathy in to the students who were sitting in front of you, and that's powerful.
Well, Angie, the other thing though is that thank you for saying that, but the real credit goes to the support behind me. You know, the people that saw me through these things when there were difficult times, and knew what I was going through, and they were there for me, and the doctors, and you know, and the medication and all of those things. So you know, that's what I attribute it to, is the people around me that made it possible for me to get through this. And like I said, I have a bad day every now and then, but I know I'm going to come out of it in the whole bit. And there are people that suffer a lot more severely than I do, you know. But it was important for me to be able to speak out on this if I really wanted to impress upon people that you do not have to be stigmatized because you suffer from mental health issues. That it's sort of like asthma. You got to deal with it. And, you know, how do we deal with it? We deal with it openly. I heard a story about can you imagine this? A psychologist who worked in the area of mental health, and his son was severely depressed. And this was a few years back, and he was so ashamed of it that he took his son to a different community in order to have him treated so that people in the community wouldn't know that his son was suffering. Well, obviously he saw the error of his ways on that and realized, no, I'm doing exactly the opposite of what I should be doing. But that's what kind of reactions you get to people. And I think we're doing a much better job now, particularly students. I think students are more than willing to say, hey, you know, something's going on. I don't know what it is, but let's talk about it. And I certainly would encourage that for everyone.
Well, it takes leaders like you telling your story. And I can think of sports figures that we've seen, NFL players, NBA players coming out and sharing their stories of battling their mental health concerns. And then think about Michael Phelps, who now is talking more openly about his struggles. And I mean, this is the most decorated Olympian in the world, right? So
Right.
it takes leaders like you all, it takes people who have found success to say, you're not one dimensional. You're not either depressed or successful. You can be depressed and be very successful, and also really want to find a way to work through it, so that you can live the life that you feel you're called to live ultimately, outside of even just awards or accolades, or gold medals, in whichever case it might be. But it takes leaders like you to open up and share your stories.
Well, thank you very much. You know what, Angie, I'm still waiting for the students to ask me that
Yeah,
question that's going to stump me. You know,
I know. Let's
but I have one rule that I've want them to abide by. Okay.
yeah.
And that is, don't ask me any hard questions.
Too
Okay.
late. Too
Come
late.
on, fire, guys.
Yeah, who has a question? And you can
Lauren, what's
unmute.
going through your mind right now?
Was that Lauren?
Yeah, I was asking Lauren.
Yeah, Lauren, do you have any questions for Dennis? And Lauren actually works at our office. She
Oh.
is not a student. She looks
Oh, okay, all right.
she looks very young, but is an accomplished professional in her own right. So,
Well, then I'm gonna go over to Crystal. I'll go over to Crystal then.
Okay.
How you doing, Crystal?
I'm doing great, Dennis. Thanks so much for being on here. You know, I can speak from personal experience being Haley's mom. She has suffered with bullying all through middle school, and you know, it was really difficult for her. But to have some of the resources opened up to her through the middle school really helped her. And Haley, you can unmute if you want and talk a little bit about some of the things that they let you do to combat that with your fast passes and stuff like that.
Yeah, when I was in middle school, I got bullied pretty bad. I'd almost gotten jumped at some points and stuff. But luckily, the school counselors were, I'd always be in the counseling office, really at school. And then I ended up being with Health Solutions. I had a counselor, and yeah, that was just it. It was.
thanks, Haley. Yeah, we're glad you had those resources.
Well,
Yeah.
Haley, and you did the right thing by reaching out, and I hope things are much better now too. And appreciate everything that you do. So thank you.
No, it was amazing. You know, her counselors would give her fast passes. So if she was really feeling threatened in class, she could leave without really having to address it in front of the teacher, where those students would know that she was tattling on them, you know, or so-called. So it really helped her, and she's thrived so much, you know,
Good.
from the start of 6th grade to where she's at now at South High School. It's just been amazing transformation.
Good for her and good for you.
Yeah. Olivia, Micah, any questions from either of you?
So let me tell you a couple other
Olivia,
things. Okay.
well, it looks like, hang on, let me see. Olivia, I'm trying to unmute you, but doesn't, oh, there we go.
I figured it out. I couldn't figure it out. I don't use Zoom. One of the questions that I had regarding to everything is, when you were in 7th grade, and it's like a while back, but when you were in 7th grade and you kind of were a little more thinking about law and stuff like that, did you see yourself coming to where you're at now? Like, did you see that coming?
Well, two things. One, you're very right about it was a long time ago when I was in the 7th grade. Now, I'm trying to figure out whether that's quite a few numbers. Yeah, just to say that, you know, it was something that was constantly on my mind, no. But, you know, I knew in the back of my mind that there were a couple of things. One is I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. The other thing I had toyed around with is whether or not I had the ability to be a sports announcer. But the lawyer thing kind of was a thread all the way through. I can't say that I was obsessed with it or anything like that. But I think one of the other things that helped me, quite frankly, was, and I would, if someone would ask me, what do you think I should concentrate? I want to be a lawyer. What do you think, what are areas that you think I should pay particular attention to? I would say reading and writing. Reading and writing. And I think that's probably true, probably in every profession. But I love to read. I don't read. I'm disappointed in myself. I'm retired and I don't read near as much as I should now. But I used to love to do that, and it helped me along in my law career by being able to study, obviously. And then when I became a judge, obviously I had to write orders. And when I was a lawyer, I had to write legal arguments. One of the most valuable lessons I ever learned is I had just finished my first year of law school at the University of Colorado, and I worked for the law firm of Holland and Hart, and they are and were at that time one of the largest, probably the largest law firm in Colorado and one of the largest in the nation. And I worked for, I ended up being a clerk for them, and one of the lawyers that I worked with at the time was a fellow by the name of Lawrence Treese. And Lawrence Treese actually happened to be my contracts teacher as well. So anyway, Larry asked me to work on this project for him, and I had to prepare a written report. And so I turned in this written report that, you know, obviously I thought it was fabulous, right? And when I got it back, there were more red marks in it than there were the blue marks of my pen, and it was devastating. And when I talked to Larry, he knew I was devastated, and he apologized. He says, "No," but you know what it taught me? What it taught me was to be much more precise in what I'm doing and what I'm saying, thinking it through, realizing that you don't have to say a bunch of words to make yourself sound smart or anything like that. It was one of the most, as devastating as it was one of the most valuable lessons I've ever learned, particularly in terms of my need to write orders. And even now I craft an article in the newspaper or something like that. So while it was devastating, it was a very unpleasant teachable moment, but something that really impacted my career and was very helpful.
I had a Redline story myself, Dennis, and but you're hitting it on the head, writing. And no matter what you do, you're going to need to read and you're going to need to write, even emails. I mean, composing an email and being able to get your thoughts clearly articulated is so important. I had a Redline moment where they gave me something to proofread, and I thought I'd done such a good job on it. And then when I turned it back in, it had an error that went to a national publication, and I was the proofreader on that. That was a teachable, you know, you start to realize there are real life consequences. It's not just that you missed something on a paper that you turned in. It's a real life consequence that something printed in a national article you didn't catch, right? So I think that's a great lesson. Micah, we haven't heard from you yet, but I know earlier you said you had some questions. So
yeah,
what do you think?
I was wondering, like, before, when like you were younger, did you ever imagine like going into a career branch that was other than law, like something else entirely?
You know, Micah, as I mentioned, I took a detour. After I graduated from undergraduate school, I taught at a little farming community called Gardner, Colorado. It's south of here. it's a little farming community, and I taught 6th grade and some 7th graders at that time. And it was one of the most fabulous experiences I've ever had. I really came to understand the commitment that a teacher has to make in order to be a good teacher. And to this day, I still have a relationship with some of my students, and those students would today be 64 years old. So you can imagine they were in the 6th grade at that time, and I've still kept in contact with some of them all of these years. They were a real inspiration to me. But so I had been accepted to law school, and I didn't go the first year I was accepted, and I didn't go the second year. And my friend, who was Mike Galvez, really encouraged me. He says, "Who do you think you are that they're going to keep holding the seat open for you? You know, you better get up here and do what you're going to, if you're going to be serious about this." And so, you know, that's what I ended up doing. But, you know, another thing, Micah, it's interesting that there are not very many people that know this, but when I was a sophomore in high school, I went to school in Oklahoma City to a preparatory seminary, St. Francis de Sales. And I went there, I went to Catholic school, grade school, high school, and I felt it was my responsibility to determine whether or not I had the calling to be a priest. And I was serious about that. So I went to school in Oklahoma City. I was a sophomore in high school, out there with the rest of the students, had to do my own laundry, my own ironing, and, you know, all of that stuff. I'm away from home. And so I did that for a year. But Micah, in all honesty, I couldn't get over the fact that I liked girls. And I said, geez, I don't think being a priest and liking girls is going to go hand in hand, you know. Well, I guess liking girls would be okay, but I liked them a lot, you know. So I that was kind of an interesting thing that there aren't a whole lot of people that know about that. But another fascinating experience in my life, being away and kind of being on my own, you know.
We didn't say that Maya, who is watching, is also your granddaughter, and she is not only your granddaughter, but a junior achievement volunteer, and had also received junior achievement programming. So she is very well connected. But Maya, I saw your head go down when he was talking about all that. I mean, never have met your grandmother had that not happened, right? So we owe his life decisions to the entire family. That's for sure.
Well, you know,
yeah.
Maya has made us all very proud, and I know she's going to be embarrassed by this, but you know, she was recently awarded the Hurleman Scholarship for $25,000 a year for 4 years, and she's going to study at the Colorado School of Mines. And she's explained to me probably a half dozen times what she's going to study, but it's too complicated for me to understand. But she's just been she's just a wonderful young lady that has made us so proud, and I'm surprised she hasn't tried to trick me with something so far today.
Yeah, Maya, any hard questions for your grandfather?
I don't know. I guess I would just, this one I don't think is too hard of a question, but like, what are some of the teachers that inspired you?
Good one.
You know, the teachers that inspired me the most were one that I recognized really had a sincere, legitimate interest in me as a person, and not just in terms of academics, but in terms of, hey, don't you realize you're being a goofball? And you probably ought to change that. I mean, you really want to be that to be part of your persona? I don't think so. But Maya, one of the things, I don't know why, but the teachers that scared the heck out of me the most are the ones I liked the most. You know, they were just challenging. And I had a creative writing class with a fellow by the name of John Senator here at Southern Colorado State College. Super demanding. And there was one time when John was demanding, and so he couldn't get a lot of students. One class I had with him was at 8 o'clock in the morning. Now imagine that, you know, 19, 20 years old and you want to get up and go to an 8 o'clock. There were only 5 of us in the class. So, I mean, you couldn't hide. You better be prepared. And you knew that he was going to be tough, but absolutely loved going to his classes. And he was a great guy. He was kind of aloof, but so the ones that challenged me are the ones that I really liked, and the ones that showed a sincere interest in me as a whole person, and not just a student. But you know, you could be the smartest guy in the whole world, the best dresser in the whole world, nicest hairdo, the whole bit, and at the end of the day, people are going to ask is, how did he treat you? How is he as a human being? That's what's going to stand out in people's minds, not whether you're the richest, the most handsome, the best dressed, the whole bit. So it was important for them to teach me, and for me, in my limited capacity, to learn the things that were important to be a good, decent, contributing human being.
I love that, Dennis. And you, we have a couple of minutes left, and I would say, I'd like to ask if when we're talking to students all across the country, especially our high school students who are the future, the most immediate future, how can they best set themselves up to be set up for success so that they can live the dreams that they have of their own tomorrows? What advice would you provide to students to keep them motivated, inspired, encouraged, and to seek the preparation that will help launch their own dreams?
I would say the first thing is be true to yourself. Be true to your commitments. Make sure that integrity is first in your life. I have a statement that I think kind of capsulizes it is, and that is that the true character of a community is measured by how well it cares for those who are unable to care for themselves. So if we commit to that, that means that we're being of service to other people, that we recognize something beyond ourselves that's important and that's going to share true dividends later in life. Be honest with yourself, and that means being honest with others. Sometimes people don't want to hear something, but perhaps they have to hear it. I would also suggest that if you feel strongly about something, do not be afraid to advocate for it. Even if you're the lone wolf in the desert, advocate for it. I know this, that if you feel very, very committed to a certain point of view and you pass up the opportunity to weigh in on that, you may never have the opportunity again to say that. So if you really believe it and you've thought everything through and you're committed to what you're doing, do that. Be respectful to others. Always understand that if we think we have it all and there's nothing more to improve on, we're going to go backwards. We're not going to forwards. There should always be challenges. There's always something that we can do to better ourselves and to better the community. But most importantly, treat every person with the most utmost dignity and respect that we can. I mean, I don't think there could be any worse feeling for someone than the feeling of being rejected. And we should never put ourselves in a position where we have someone feel that we've done that with them or that we've let other people do it either. So care about your fellow human beings, be true to yourself, and continue to work hard, and also play hard when it's time to play hard. Play hard. It all goes into the whole thing. At the end of the day, we are the good, the bad, and the ugly. Whatever we are, it makes up our whole person. And just be proud of it. Thank the people that are around you. Respect the people that are teaching us all the time, and take care of yourselves. Reach out when you need something. You know, there's always someone that is willing to help us out when we have a time in need. I wish you all the very, very best in what you do, and I thank you for your involvement. And I'm really excited about what this new generation is going to bring to this country. I'm very confident in the students that we're putting out today.
Dennis, whole person, and that is what we see with you. We talked about mental health. We talked about education. You've highlighted integrity, respect, and of course, play hard. Be whole people. Be real people. Bring your whole self to everything you do. That is a big part of the reason that you were selected as a laureate in our Spirit of Entrepreneurship Awards this year in 2020 for Junior Achievement of Southern Colorado. We are grateful for your time. We're grateful for you volunteering to share your story with these students and others as this recording goes further. We're so appreciative, so grateful for your time, and so grateful for all that you do in the Pueblo community. Thank you.
Thank you for being so kind, and I thank the students and other people that were involved in this thing, and I love you all. Have a great day. Stay safe, and change the world.